They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, Mark DeCourcy.
Thanks, everyone. Good morning and welcome back to Opportunity Forward. I hope you enjoyed the reception last night, and we have a great day of programming here, and once again, we'll have a lot more people coming in, and probably in the next hour, so please make room for them as the room fills up. You may not know this, but today is National Recycling Day, and that was why we showed that video. So for those of you who have the opportunity to recycle today, please do. The Chamber Foundation works with companies on their sustainability and circular economy programs. And there's a working session today I wanted to point out on our Beyond 34 project in Orlando. Beyond 34 is a first of its kind public-private partnership to help break through the recycling barrier of 34%. I think a lot of people will say, which recycling barrier, right? Because I recycle. No, it's the recycling rate's been stuck at 34% in the US for 20 years. It's shocking, isn't it? So we're going to work together with the Walmart Foundation, Target, the Dow Chemical Company, Walgreens and Republic Services, the Mayor's Office, the Orlando Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of other companies who have a presence in Orlando, and I think you know who some of those are. And we're going to try to get that rate up in Orlando, build out a pilot project, and then scale it across the country. If you're interested in learning more about the work on this project, I encourage you to join that working session at 3 o'clock. As a reminder, you can follow the conversation today on Twitter using the hashtag USCCFOpportunity, and our Twitter handle is USCCFBiz4Good, that's B-I-Z, the number 4, good. Additionally, the Chamber Foundation app is a one-stop resource for the conference agenda, speaker bios, and a way to network. In our plenary session, we take the questions through the app. I know a lot of people wanted to ask questions yesterday, so please use the app to get those questions into our team, and we'll have those questions presented to the speakers. Also, upstairs, we have a tech corner. You can recharge your phones, courtesy of Comcast and NBC Universal. It's my honor now to introduce the morning speakers, Shay Wong and Neil Gott. Shay is the founder and chief executive officer of Boxed, an online mobile membership-free wholesale retailer that offers direct delivery of bulk-size packages via the Boxed app or through its website. Shay and his company have made the headlines for their social activism and the benefits they offer employees, including unlimited vacations, who wouldn't want that, maternity paternity leave, a wedding stipend, a college tuition support for the children of the employees. All pretty amazing. You'll hear more about that soon. In his keynote address, he'll discuss why doing good is just not the right thing to do, but it's good for business. But first, we'll hear from Neil Gott, author of Core. You see a lot of these flyers on your tables. Check it out. If you haven't read the book, you should. Neil's whole premise is how a single organizing idea can change business for good. And Neil's also the founder of Neil Gott and Associates. It's an independent management consulting firm that works globally out of London. Neil's going to be leading us into a discussion of how our companies and organizations can make significant shifts for the future. For those of you who were here yesterday morning, you heard Valerie Keller from Ernst & Young give us a lot to think about when she described the pressures on business and how to change to find purpose in what they do and why they have to do this. So Neil's going to take us a step further to share the how businesses can change for good using strategic management tools. And the one that he wants to talk most about is the single organizing idea. Please welcome Neil.
Good. That's great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. It is a real honour to be here. So I'd like to thank Mark and his team. It's very razzmatazzy up here. We don't do things quite like this in the UK, but it's wonderful to be here. I have got 10 minutes, and in this 10 minutes, I want to impart some information to you that hopefully will inspire you to go away and rethink about business and the possibility of it actually changing. This is Simon Sinek. He's on a world tour at the moment with his book, asking the question why. And there's a lot of people asking the question why. I want to talk about how, but let's just do the why in 2 minutes. Here's why. Here's 6 reasons why. First one, okay, the planet is screwed, okay? We know that. Parts of it's on fire, some of it's going underwater. We've got, according to the experts, a decade to sort that out. It's such a massive problem that governments, NGOs, and businesses have got together to form the Sustainable Development Goals. So climate change is one of 16 other reasons why. Here's another reason why. We all know. Everybody knows. We're all connected. We are aware that there is a problem. We're also aware that a lot of people are looking at business to solve that problem. Okay, particularly a group of people that we've come to know, very famously the millennials. They may change. There's all sorts of different data about them, but the fact is the pressure is on. It's coming in terms of what they're saying about you as a consumer and what they're saying about businesses as an employee. The time is to get real. They want businesses to get real. If you are selling products or services at cheap prices on the market to people that are throwaway, they know what effect that has down the supply chain. So it's all great to talk about supply chains, and we're doing this and we're doing that, but actually it is time now to get real. Here's another reason. Brand won't do it. Lipstick on a gorilla does not work anymore. And people see through it. The days of hiding behind brand are over. Here's another reason why. Some businesses have already worked out that they need to change if they're going to prosper in the future. They need to change if they're going to have a sustainable economic model as well as one around sustainability in terms of climate and all the SDGs. They know it and they're ahead. They are ahead. Here's the other reason to change. Capitalism is changing. It is actually changing. People are looking at other models. Since the global financial crisis, people have sat down and pressure is on to change the system. And to change the system so that people are not running away with the money anymore. It's not about making profit, as much profit as you can possibly make for a small bunch of people at the top of organizations and outside it in terms of investors. Those are the reasons why. Those are 6 reasons why. There are many others. So here's the point, and the reason why I'm here, and the reason why I'm on this World Book Tour, and the reason why I wrote the book. I want to share something around how do we actually change. Well, you can go and buy the book. We have 30 copies of the book at a discount of $20, which you can buy out there, or you can go online and get it. There's a discount with there. You can read the book, or I'll just impart some stuff. We can actually learn from history. Let's just cut through the BS here. We've been in this place before, okay? We're not reinventing anything. This is George Fox. He was the founder of the Quakers. 1680s companies were there for societal good. You guys are all experts. You all know about this stuff already. But we can go to 1927 and a whole raft of businesses that were set up for the purpose of being good for safety or good for people or good for planet. Volvo is a case in point of a brand that was built off the back of providing a safe vehicle. I was in Sweden last week with them, hosting a core dinner debate. They're going forward now looking at AI, how that's going to be safe, how that's going to work, life paint, cyclists, pedestrians. It's not that they're in the car business. They're in the business of safety. We could look at Unilever, which Valerie talked a lot about yesterday. And yes, for multinational corporates, Paul Polman and Unilever is the poster child. But let's be honest, there are a whole bunch of other businesses as well that are on that journey. And I've worked a lot with Unilever, and they've been involved with me on this, in this book and what we've been doing. But what I want to do is I want to give you a warning about something that didn't work and something that could work and could have worked, okay? I want to take you back to the year 2000. In the year 2000, I worked for WPP, Martin Sorrell, the world's largest advertising and branding company. And I advised people like Arthur Andersen, Merrill Lynch, Standard Chartered Bank, De Beers, and many other multinational businesses. And I had a view of this BP job that we worked on. My company took British Petroleum to Beyond Petroleum. It set out to bring to life a vision that Lord Brown had to change a business, okay? To take it beyond petroleum. For all the reasons that these businesses face today. We're running out of oil, it's not great for the planet, blah, 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 blah. If we don't do it, people won't buy our products or services. The same stuff. This is 17 years ago, and the research for it started in 1996. Here, you'll see on the slide, this is actually from a website taken at the time of the launch of Beyond Petroleum. And you can see here it says, a unified sense of purpose. And people keep on talking to me and saying, hey, purpose, you know, it's this new trendy word, it's like authentic. We've been talking about this stuff for decades, yeah? Okay. And so when this new sense of purpose went to the advertising companies that I worked for and where I learnt my lessons about not what to do, they splashed it all over the place and said, look at us, look at what we're doing. Aren't we amazing? Competitive advantage, competitive advantage. They didn't understand the brief from the company. They didn't understand it was a core strategy, and they ran off with it. And then this happened. Texas, 2005. And then this happened. Alaska, 2006. Disasters where people got killed, going completely against the core strategy. And then finally this, the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, okay? And what happened in summary was this. This is the lesson learned, okay? Is they wanted to go from being an oil business to be an energy business. They wanted to position themselves for the future. They wanted to create clear water between them and their competitors, although there is a backstory to that. But what they ended up with was very dirty water, okay? And it landed this guy, who was the CEO at the time, Hayward, in very deep water indeed, and he lost his job. And BP went from being the third largest oil business in the world to something like 6th or 7th where they are today. So what are the lessons learned? Look at this statement here. This is from 2006. This was one of the employees. Just have a quick read of that. You cannot mix numbers with values. You cannot. You have to make up your mind what you're in the business of. And your middle management needs to understand what you're in the business of. It also made me feel, I'm a brand guy by background, although I've been working against brand for a long time. You can't hide behind your brand, and you can't hide behind CSR anymore. They're not separate things, they have to be core. And this model here is entirely appropriate. Forget the wording a little bit about mission statement, brand values, and brand promise. Also, forget a little bit about needing to be the world's greatest company or whatever it might be. But this model, this very simple model here, can run a business of 165,000 people around the world. It could, but it got let down by the fact that it wasn't actually implemented as a strategy within the business properly. And that's what single organizing idea is all about. It's not purpose. It is a strategic management tool that your business can actually use and employ. It takes single purpose of societal and economic purpose and combines them into one single thing. One thing, okay? So that's your single organizing idea. The second part of it is, that can take, all of that can take in charity, sustainability, shared value, whatever you want to call it, but it all comes into one place. The O of organizing is the organizing system. It is the way that you actually organize around the 6 functions of your business and the financial function umbrella across the top of it, okay? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could turn around and say, hey, look at Unilever. They're obviously generation 6. They're 6 years into a program that started in 2010. Or look at Life is Good, who I was just talking about now, who are on a really exciting journey. They're like generation 2, yeah, or generation 3, where they've just set out. Or look at Patagonia, where they're generation 10, they were born with this stuff in the beginning. And the ability for consumers to understand that, and for your employees to understand it, and your key stakeholders, and your investors to understand that, could be awesome. And the third part of it is the idea, single organizing idea. Ideas have the ability to transform the world. It is about communication, and it is about stories, and it is about getting people to believe in what you're trying to achieve and what the truth is of your business. Very quickly, I've got 3 seconds. That is the process for doing it, okay? It's set out in the book, as is lots of examples and lots of real evidence about the return on investment in doing this and why you should do it. I'll end with this. It takes time and effort. It takes time and effort. But right at the beginning of my talk, I said we had 10 years. So we need to get on with it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and chief executive officer, Boxed, Che Huang.
Morning, everyone. So the timer is going up, so that's a good sign. It started off at 1. I was like, wow, they really don't like me. I was okay. I don't know what I said back there, but that didn't work out well. But it's great to be here. I'm going to do what the only thing I know how to do is just to walk you through the story of our company and how we became known for shipping toilet paper and being kind of good corporate citizens while doing so. And so I don't have a strategy in which we rolled it out. I don't have an explanation of why it worked for us. But I'm guessing that's why they pay you the big bucks. And so you can tell me what we did right, and then I'll just say it was my idea, and I'll take all the credit for it. But in the beginning, we're in around cocktail parties, wherever we go these days. We started this company in my garage. So, I loved going to the Price Club early on in my life with my mom. We went every other weekend. When I moved into the city, I didn't have a car anymore, so I knew Cheerios wasn't $6 a box at a bodega in Manhattan. So I was like, okay, how many other millions of Americans had the same problem as I did? And so, like all naive 30-some-year-old people, I guess I shouldn't have been as naive as I was. We started in a garage in tropical New Jersey, and everyone loves to say, oh man, that gets so sexy. I want to start a company in my garage one day. I was 32 years old, sitting here in my garage with a leaf blower. There's like snow shovels in the back. My friends and family would come over, and they would be like, oh, this is the great Boxed. And they're like, oh, Che's unemployed these days, man. It's not a career. My mother-in-law saw this, and she told my wife, she's like, I knew he wasn't the one. Where's John from college? He was such a nice guy. And I was like, oh, in front of the kids, why, please. So it was tough going early on. And so this was it, but we had a dream, and we lived that dream. We were just 4 folks really trying to make our place in the world. We had a successful company before, but wasn't nearly as successful as Boxed is now. But we were just going after it and trying to live our dreams. And so things started picking up. We had a few days where no one ordered from us, and we were doing the math that 300 million Americans all use toilet paper, or we hope that all 300 million Americans all use toilet paper, yet no one ordered from us 2 days in a row, and that was tough times. But we started hiring friends and neighbors as we started scaling up the business a little bit, and so we started kind of putting up rows, and the Today Show mentioned us, and this is when things really got real. So they started dropping industrial-sized pallets on my driveway in the middle of New Jersey. If you stalk me and find my home address in Central Jersey, you'll find on Google Street View there's still an old picture of a 40-foot pod container where all the P&G shipments would come. And the truck drivers would come down the street in these huge 40-foot containers and say, oh, where's the dock? I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? This, you're in Central Jersey, man. You just went down a whole street of residential houses. There's no dock. So we would go in and unload the boxes. There'd be no parking up and down the street. By this time, we had about 20 people in my house, and people I didn't know. One morning I woke up, I was fixing breakfast. guy I didn't know was there, and I'm like, I hope he works for us. There's random people now. Baby department was in the basement. Chip department was in the living room. High-value merchandise was actually in my bedroom. So you better have a good reason if you're going upstairs. And so when people went upstairs, I'm like, you better be getting the movie tickets. And so it was full-on growth time for our company. This was every last order that we shipped in that first full quarter as a business. So every blue dot was an order in 2014, or Q1 2014. Every red dot was a Costco location throughout the country. And so if you look at the Northeast Corridor, Miami, LA County, San Francisco, Chicago, we were solving that problem. But then Q2 came about. We started spreading throughout the Midwest. And in Q3 of 2014, we spread throughout the kind of, I guess, the spread of the population of the US. And so I had two main insights. One was, it's not just a physical means problem we're solving anymore. This was time and patience. So in a lot of ways, what we do is not sell toilet paper, but we sell time and patience back to people. And two, we needed to get the F out of my garage. And so at this point in time, it was really, really crazy. I remember my neighbors thought we were just selling drugs or we started an e-commerce company. And I maintain to them to this day, we tried both and only the e-commerce side worked out. And so they're like, oh, is he joking? I hope he was joking. But we found a few things. And so I'm going to skip through a lot of this. We found it's a huge market, $200 billion of just BJ's, Sam's Club, and Costco revenue. And really, it's 0% mobile. How crazy is that? There's room for niche players. Sam's Club shares the same parking lot as Walmart in 60% of the locations. Why do they do that? So we feel like we share the same parking lot as Amazon. So we service every airport in America. So no one at Delta Airlines is going to order $30,000 worth of granola bars on Amazon. It's a lot of clicking you'd have to do. And who knows how it would show up. So we built a really interesting platform, and so we started spreading. We now have fulfillment centers all over the country, one of which is one of the most advanced in the country. So you'll see like conveyor belts, robotics, and all this and that. But it's been pretty wild, and even to this day, when I walk through this facility, I now know what it feels like to be a third world dictator, because when it opened, I just like walked in there, and pretty soon like an entourage of engineers formed behind me, and I was walking through, and I was like, oh my gosh, they expect me to say something smart. And so I picked this like one sorter that was like kind of narrow, and I'm like, why don't we make this wider? Wouldn't that be more efficient? And they were like, oh, brilliant. Dear leader is brilliant. And I'm sure when I left, they were like, never let that man ever back in here again. And we did all these press photos where I just pointed at stuff. So I was like, so when I see these, when I watch the news, I'm like, oh, did I look like that? And so, but it's really interesting. But now the interesting part for me as a person. And so we're different in a bunch of ways. And so, yeah, we shipped this toilet paper all over to you. Yeah, we went from, $40,000 in sales in my garage to 36 months later, doing over 9 figures, over $100 million of revenue. I maintain to this day, there's no male pattern baldness in my family. So like every year of revenue, as the revenue goes up, so does my hairline. So I'm like, oh my gosh, but hopefully there'll be a good outcome and I can buy it all back. And so I'm only half joking about that. But throughout this time, I hope you get to see a little bit of the transformation of who we are and frankly, who I've become. And so 4 folks in the garage, startup folks, t-shirt wearing, like shorts wearing, like let's go at it. Like you watch The Social Network, I did too, awesome, let's do it. But going through, you started meeting more and more people. And now we have hundreds of people all around the country that work for us. Literally right now, some of the earliest shifts in our company, they start at about 4 a.m. And so I'm here like downing coffee in the back. I'm like, IV coffee now. But these folks have been at work for about 4 hours already, or maybe 5 hours for some of them. And so Tim is one of these folks. And so Tim's official title when he first started was box loader. And we're from startup land, right? We have an office in Silicon Valley. We have an office in Soho, locations all throughout the US. And so when you go to cocktail parties with other tech folks, and I'm not sure if there are tech folks here, but I'm sure you guys know this. So you meet a lot of crazy people with like esoteric titles, like digital whisperer and chief awesome officer. And you're just like, what do you do all day? And they're like, I told you what I do. And I'm like, that doesn't say anything, man. Like, what do you whisper all day? How do you whisper digital? Don't you type digital? But Tim, if he had a card, he didn't have a card. You'd meet him at a cocktail party, and he'd say, I'm Tim. My title is box loader. And you wouldn't say, Tim, what do you do all day? You know, he'd be like, load boxes, man, you know? And so that's what Tim did. So he's in front of all these boxes, and, you know, the box would divert down a chute. Tim would go, look at the box, pick it up, go back, put down the box on the waiting truck. He'd go back, more boxes, pick one up, go, and put it down. Do it a few hours, always on time, would go take a break, come back, more boxes. They're called boxed. It makes sense, you know? And so he'd go pick up a box, put it down on the truck for 8 hours a day, 10 if you can get overtime, always on time, never really took vacation, and never really took a break. And so a lot of hardworking folks just like Tim all around the country for us now. And when they show a propensity to excel and exceed expectations, we promote them. And so when we promote them, we have a really nice lunch or a really nice dinner. And so we're a startup. We sell toilet paper. Margins are thin. So nice for us is like Chili's, maybe like Cheesecake Factory, if I'm feeling really kind. Or this one was at Seasons 52, so we went all out. And so everyone gets dressed up. And for a lot of these folks, it's the first time in their entire life that they've ever been honored or celebrated in a corporate environment. And so everyone's really happy. A lot of people don't know how to act, and so people are feeling a little awkward sometimes. This was back in the day when we first had our HR department that consisted of one person. So he had a master's in HR, but the only retail experience he had was he worked at retail at PacSun at the mall. And so I was like, you know, and then someone in our company was like, we need HR. I was like, remember you said that one day, you know? And so there was alcohol at the event. It was free flowing. Had a few drinks, and we're all having a good time. Tim gets up. You know, we have executives that flew from all over the country to come to this event. Tim gets up with his drink, and he's like, I got something to say. I am mortified at this point in time, because I'm like, no one told Tim, rule number one, don't get drunk at the holiday party. And if you do, that's why Uber was invented. Like, you know, call the Uber, get your ass home. So that's one. And two, nothing good in life has ever come from anyone saying, hold my drink, watch this. And so I'm like looking at PacSun guy, and I'm like, this is not gonna go well. PacSun guy is like, rock on, man, this is gonna go really well, you know? And so, you know, he's from PacSun, you know, he's worked at the mall. He was like 24 years old. And so I'm sitting there mortified in the back. So Tim gets up and says, you guys don't know me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great start this is gonna be, you know? And so I'm like, another drink, like, geez, like I might as well enjoy myself. And so this is gonna be the shortest lived promotion in the history of our company. And so he gets up and he says, I'm Tim. You guys don't know me, but I'm actually pretty well educated. So college education, and actually I worked at the largest law firm in New Jersey as a paralegal for 25 plus years. He looks great for his age, but he's an older gentleman. In 2008, along with all the other carnage that was going on in our country, he was laid off, like millions of other Americans. And he looked at us and said, you know, I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find a steady job. But throughout that time, I saw another change coming, and it was the change of technology. And I knew tech was going to be a new trend for us. But I lived in Central Jersey. I didn't have an engineering degree. I was a paralegal. I was an older guy. What tech company would want me? And so when I saw your Craigslist ad for a box loader, I said, I'm overqualified, but I can load boxes. I can do that. I can join the team. And Tim did that. And he did it for 8-10 hours a day, nonstop, weeks on a time, month over month, and now year over year. And he did that for us. And he said, he looked at me, I was sitting in the back. He looked at me and he said, for that chance that you took on me, I will never let you down. And to this day, I get goosebumps a little bit when I think about it, because at that moment, my life changed. You know, at that moment, my professional life changed. At that moment, the purpose and the mission of the company changed. We were no longer just four folks just like feeling it out in a garage. We were the shepherds of folks who had entrusted their livelihoods in our hands. So in some ways, I was already 33 by that time. In some ways, it was the first time I ever grew up in life. And so I look at Tim even now with that look and the look that he gives me, and I see it all around the country whenever we visit these fulfillment centers, and I see that same look. I saw that same look when my mom was making, minimum wage, supporting a family of 4. I saw it in my dad's face when he was riding his bike to work, because we grew up in a working class family, and I see it today in hundreds of people whenever I visit the country, and it's something I take near and dear, or I hold near and dear to my heart. And even this morning, on 4 hours of sleep, why am I here? Because Tim doesn't have an excuse of why he isn't coming on time. So why should I? And so it's contagious. And now that we have enough money, we built this huge automation system. So is it the right thing to do to just say, Tim, thank you very much for your service. Mr. Robato's got your job now. Have a great life. No. So what we did was retrain these folks. All these folks who were doing unskilled kind of work are now trained on state-of-the-art machinery, state-of-the-art robotics. A lot of these folks know how to troubleshoot these systems nowadays. Everyone in our fulfillment center, probably aside from the porter and the janitor, has an iPad, knows the system, and is working with technology. And so it's not easy. It would have been a lot easier if we just dispatched half the company, but we didn't do that. Even some of the benefits that we have, including a large portion of my share in the company, is now dedicated to paying the college tuition of any full-time employee that works for us. We already have a few folks in college, so even that, you're starting to see why the genesis of that happened the way it happened. And so I maintain that I'm a huge proponent of community college, and so whenever we're writing these checks, I'm like, have you considered community college or in-state college? And so usually the parents are like grabbing my hand and just moving the pen on the check. But we've got a few folks there, and it's been a great system. And even life-changing events. Take Marcel for example. So Marcel broke down crying at work, and so I called him that night, and I'm like, Marcel, you're a grown-ass man. Why are you crying at work? So luckily, he got the joke. He's kind of laughing. He recovered by then. But Marcel was working 2 jobs. I didn't know this. 2 jobs, 7 days a week, overtime whenever he could get it. And he did the math at work one day, and his mom had gotten sick, and he was taking all of his savings for his wedding and was paying for his mom's medical bills, and did the math that he actually was not saving for his wedding fast enough for his mom to be able to go. And when you are the leader of a group of people like that, how do you respond when someone says that to you? You can say you can work more hours. Well, he was already working the maximum hours I think he physically could, not even by federal law, but just literally as much as he could, as many hours in a day. Or you can say, we're going to step in and help. And so that's what we did. But that's really contagious, because then there's other things that we can do. And so the women of Box banded together, stopped me at the door one day before I had my coffee, and I'm like, please just let me get to my desk first, I said, we're complicit in the pink tax. I'm like, what the hell is the pink tax? And so I didn't know this until about a year ago, but 33 states in our wonderful country still taxes feminine care products like tampons and pads like luxury good items. Condoms in a lot of jurisdictions aren't taxed, but tampons and pads are luxury good items. And so I did like the straight face test, and I we should all take it here for all the guys in the audience. Like if your wife or girlfriend or whomever calls you and says, hey honey, can you bring home like pads or tampons on the way home? Tell this to her next time. Just say, babe, times are tough. Did you see the GDP report? Luxury good items, let's try for next month. I promise next month will be way better. So just do without it this month, and like luxury good items is really tough, and so you'll be single really quickly. And so I found that to be the case. And so if it doesn't pass the straight face test, then why should we really tax these items like luxury good items? And so what we do is we actually rebate the tax back to women all around the country if they unfairly have to pay it, and even the manufacturer tax. And so sometimes a pink razor will cost 50% more than a blue razor, or a pink basketball will cost 50% more than a blue basketball for really unknown reasons. And so if there's any unfair pricing like that, we actually rebate it. We rebate it back to our customers. And to this day, we're still the only retailer or decent-sized retailer in America that does this. And so these are the wonderful women of Boxed that have taken that initiative, that have taken kind of what we started off with as a very simple concept of treating people well, and have taken it and actually become the life of the company. They took this initiative, and now they travel all across the country to testify under oath in front of state legislatures to try to abolish the pink tax, including Stanley, the office dog, who is a female. I checked. I have no idea why we named our dog Stanley when she's a female, so I checked. But I thought they were messing with me. But Stanley is a welcome part of the team as well. But hopefully, like I said, not a ton of deep-level strategy and who we became and how we became it, but I hope you get to see the transformation of what I said before, just not only me, but our company, from a garage to where we are today. We didn't whiteboard the strategy of how we can do good. It came from the heart, and it came from who we are as people. And so I wish I had a better explanation of why it's been successful for us in terms of doing good and doing well by doing good. But hopefully the professionals in the audience, you can see a story like ours, find inspiration in it, and take it back to your own organizations and help us move the agenda forward. So thank you, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to submit questions for the next panel on our mobile app.
Thanks again, Shay and Neil. These conversations, I think, are really inspiring, and hopefully it will elicit even more conversations into the breakout sessions later today. Next up, we want to welcome this Putting Our Values to Work discussion. It's with Stefan Jacobs, who's the co-founder of Cotopaxi and Chief Operating Officer, and Lisa Tanzer, who's the president of Life is Good. They'll be giving examples of how their companies are putting not just their founding principles, but also now their guiding principles into action. Please join me in welcoming them and Philana Patterson. She's the money editor for USA Today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. Corporate social responsibility and corporate values, I mean, they seem like they could be throwaway words. What do they really mean? You know, they sound good, but Lisa Tanzer and Stefan Jacob are here to talk about how you build or transform a business that makes a profit, but is also dedicated to fulfilling a greater need. And we will be taking questions at the end. And so if you could go to your conference app, and if you have anything that you want to ask, put it there and we'll get to it at the end. But I'd like to start out by talking to both of you about, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your businesses, and also what inspired you to be here today to talk about your values.
Sure.
First?
Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. Life is Good. I don't know if you guys are familiar with us. We're a $100 million lifestyle apparel brand, primarily t-shirts, hats, bags, casual type of stuff. But in addition to being an apparel brand, we also are a nonprofit. So it's Life is Good, the company, and the Life is Good Kids Foundation, which is dedicated to helping kids overcome poverty, violence, and illness. And early on, we were just an apparel company, and I guess we'll get into that, but we found that our message resonated on a much deeper level with folks, and so our real singular mission is to spread the power of optimism. So it seemed like a great time to be here based on the topics today, the things we heard this morning, to share a little bit more about how our companies come to sort of be mission-based, and also I love to be on the panel with Stefan because they are mission-based from inception, so it was a welcome invitation.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for having me. My name is Stefan Jacob. I'm one of the founders of Cotopaxi. We're an outdoor gear brand, so we design and manufacture outdoor apparel, packs, sleeping bags, tents, the like. And at the very core of the brand is this idea that organizations indeed have a responsibility to do more than just make money for their shareholders, and that's really very much rooted in the personal experiences of myself and my co-founders, which we can go into a little bit more deeply. But yeah, we from the get-go decided that we wanted to build a business that was true to who we were as individuals and our experiences living in the developing world, and that would combine and sort of be a case study that you can indeed do good and do well economically at the same time.
Now, what I know about your story is you started out, I guess, with some of your co-founders talking about what you wanted to do in a cabin in Utah. Can you take me back there?
Sure.
And how you made the decision that you wanted to have a business that focused also on eradicating poverty?
Yeah. Yeah, as I'd mentioned, this is largely driven by our personal experiences. And in my case, in 2004, I was working for a nonprofit organization in Indonesia that was dedicated to the elimination of child labor on the Indonesian archipelago. And that was a really wonderful experience in the sense that we took over 700 kids from fishing platforms, from factories, from prostitution, back to their homes and schools. But it was also eye-opening in that our efforts were just a drop in the bucket. The reason these kids were in these situations in the first place was that their families simply didn't have access to many of the privileges that we all were able to enjoy growing up: safety, security, healthcare, education, livelihoods. And there's one situation that I remember very distinctly. We were working at one of our subchapters. It was a shelter for youth prostitutes. And we were mainly there for health education. And there was one girl, they were like in their 16, 17-year-olds, was one girl, her name was Mila. And it wasn't a situation where there was like an evil pimp keeping them like in line. They were simply there and had come together to live together in this shelter. And so it was a little strange for me. I struck up a conversation. My wife's half Indonesian, so I spoke Bahasa at the time already. And I asked her, we were building rapport, and I asked her, Mila, why are you here? Why are you doing this? And she like became quiet for a second and looked at me and said in Indonesian, "Apa lagi ke buat?" which essentially means, what else should I do? So it really like left a mark for me to like see this girl who was very articulate and smart, for her to recognize or to believe that the best shot she had at life was doing that. That just really left a mark, and is one of the reasons why with Cotopaxi, livelihoods, creating opportunities in communities where people don't perceive there to be any, is one of our sort of core pillars of our impact work. And the other co-founders, they really share those experiences. They have, our product co-founders lived and worked in factories in Bangladesh and in other places. Davis, my co-founder, has lived in South America for a long period of time. And so I think that exposure is what drove us to really want to find a way to, yes, build a profitable business and find a more sustainable way to have impact than a sort of pure nonprofit approach, which can be problematic. And, but yeah, do it in a way that is truly sustainable. The organization that I mentioned, they were dependent on grants from UNICEF and the ILO and couldn't renew those grants. The people who ran the organization were wonderful humanitarians, but terrible fundraisers. And so with Cotopaxi, we really wanted to find a way to do this differently and be profit-driven, but then dedicate a portion of these profits to doing good.
And so, Lisa, with you at Life is Good, that wasn't necessarily how the company began. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, our company was founded 25 years ago from two brothers, Bert and John Jacobs, who really after college just didn't want to get a job. They were artists, so they would design T-shirts and go in a van and like get kicked off college campuses and sell, without permits on the street, to try to see if they can make a living making T-shirts based on their art. And after 5 years of doing that with very little success, although they probably were successful in going to a lot of parties and not getting their jobs, they came up with the words "life is good," and we have like a character named Jake. And they would have these keg parties, and they would get back and put all the art on the wall. And people were like, "Hey, we like this guy. We like the words "life is good." So they started to make the shirts and got successful. So they grew, from zero to zero-ish, maybe like a few $100s, to $3 million pretty fast. But what surprised them was, and the shirts were just celebrating simple pleasures. The character Jake likes to bike, he likes to hike, he likes to eat ice cream. But pretty early on, letters started coming in from people and oftentimes kids who were facing really huge challenges. So people who would be facing cancer, who would say, I'm wearing Life is Good to every chemo appointment to remind me to be positive, or people loss of a loved ones giving out the shirts at funerals to say, this person was a really optimistic spirit, we want to celebrate their optimism. So early on, that surprised those guys. They didn't know what to do with it, but realized, oh my gosh, we have a greater purpose here. Our purpose is really about spreading the power of optimism. At a light level, it could be like, hey, I want to make your day and be compassionate to somebody. But at a deeper level, the idea that your mindset can change and that can really change your life. So then probably, I would say that's in like the late 1990s, the company really embraced the mission, both from a brand standpoint, but also for then helping kids who could really use optimism.
So how does that manifest itself, in your values and the way you operate the business?
Yeah, it's everything for us now. So we call our 10 values the superpowers, and what that means is that if you unlock optimism, things like gratitude, authenticity, fun, and humor can come in, love can come into your life. So everything that we do, every shirt that we make has some sort of those superpowers or just general optimism in mind. Those are the messages we're trying to convey. The content that we share with our community. For a brand our size, $100 million, not the biggest brand in the world, but our social engagement and community is much greater than most of the big athletic brands that the people who like to talk to us. So we view it every day as put the shirts out there and then hear from our community, hear from people who are embracing optimism and let them learn from each other. So it really drives everything, everything that we do. And also 10% of our profits go to the Life is Good Kids Foundation. So we know everything that we're doing, every dollar we're making, all employees know the more we make, the more we can help the kids who really need special care to develop optimism.
That's interesting. And Cotopaxi, you donate 2% of revenue. And I think that's a very interesting point that you made about it motivating employees. I mean, Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about, I'd like to hear from both of you about how that manifests itself in the workplace in terms of people really being motivated to help fund the missions that you all believe so much in.
Yeah, Neil mentioned, he showed a slide of millennials on the screen there, and it's absolutely true. We're seeing the same thing, that this younger employee and this younger workforce, they do care about the brands they consume. They do care about their place of work. And we personally perceive it to be a massive opportunity and benefit, the fact that we're a purpose-driven, a mission-driven organization. In terms of talent acquisition and retention. In the first 4 weeks after we launched, we received over 400 unsolicited job applications, just from people saying, hey, I want to be a part of this. How can I get involved? On our website, on our job board, we have a name your job listing where even if we don't have a specific opening, people can submit their resume saying, I want to get involved if you ever have something open, and we get hundreds of applications on a monthly basis there. So we have, if you go on our Glassdoor ratings, like throughout, 5-star rating, and we're a small organization, we're only 50 people, so it's early, but we're definitely seeing that the fact that we're a mission, purpose-driven organization helps us attract some of the very best talent and retain that talent and keep them happy. People are looking for meaningful, opportunities to grow in the workplace and to engage. You spend so much time at work to do that in an environment where it's about more than just a paycheck and more than just making money. So that's a huge benefit for us.
What about it, Life is Good?
Yeah, for us, it's an interesting model. For a lot of years, we were like the Life is Good Kids Foundation was a pass-through organization giving money to, different children's charities and the like. I actually happened to be on the board of one of those since the early 90s that became the Life is Good Kids Foundation, because in 2008, we said we don't want to be giving money out. We actually want to do the work ourselves. So one of the organization that I was with became the Life is Good Kids Foundation. So in our offices, there's a for-profit and a not-for-profit. And the not-for-profit team, there's 12 people on that team, they're going out working in the hospitals, early child care centers, after-school programs directly. So I think for us, it's one. We're in the same meetings, we're doing the same things legally, you need to be separate. So I think the people on the for-profit side, they feel like they're part of a nonprofit as well. They're seeing the work that's going on. They're hearing about the teachers that we work with. They're hearing about the kids that we help. So it's very motivating. I think the mission of optimism overall, we do a culture survey every twice a year. And what we hear from our employees is like, you know what, it's a good reminder. Like for me, I'm going through a tough time in my life. And then when I come to work and I'm thinking about optimism and I'm thinking about how to reframe my own self, or hearing stories of people who are facing even greater adversity, you know, they get a personal benefit on how to live their life. So I think similar to you, like we get people hundreds of people said, I just want to work at Life is Good. How can I work at Life is Good? I'll work for free at Life is Good, you know? So we're very fortunate that way for the right folks. It's a great place to just feel good.
So both of your companies have supply chains. You have suppliers, you have the delivery end of things. How important is it to you that all of your partners have similar values? And also, I guess part two of that question would be, how do you ensure in the various places in your supply and delivery chains that the companies that you're working with are in line with what you believe in?
Yeah, it's a crucial pillar of our impact work is the supply chain. We do firmly believe that we can leverage our supply chain to impact the communities where we make our products and uplift them in a positive and sustainable way. So very important. We vet our partners rigorously and carefully. We don't go through any third-party agent in between in terms of a supply chain broker. We do all of that in-house and have a very rigorous catalog that we basically put a check mark next to before we start working with any supplier. Spot checks, like everything that sort of best practice in terms of like supply chain transparency. And we recognize that there's a huge opportunity here for us as a brand. It's become part of our brand identity. I'll give you one example. It's a product line called the Del Dia, which is a line of backpacks that are incredibly colorful. Every single one is unique. And the reason they look so colorful is that we recognize two major issues in our supply chain. The first is, and that's true throughout the outdoor industry, and most of apparel manufacturing for that matter, is that there's a tremendous amount of waste. At all these factories, there are warehouses full of excess old material that's just sitting on a shelf that's left over from previous bulk production runs. And the second is that there's really very little sort of creative agency that the sewers on the line have. So we said, well, can't we do something about that? And that's where the idea for the Del Dia was born, where we take all this excess fabric and say, you sewer decide what panel, what fabric to put where on the backpack.
That's so amazingly awesome. They look so cool. You have to check those.
Yeah, the only instruction was that no two bags can be alike. Huh. Other than that, you're responsible for designing the backpack. And that allows us to use up all that fabric, because even if we only have a small roll of fabric, which is not enough for a full bulk production run, by cutting it up into small panels that go on a backpack in like a random manner, we can use up all that material. We pay cents on the dollar on the material because it would otherwise go into a landfill or get burned. So our margin is amazing on it. The sewers suddenly have creative agency. And it's an incredible story that we can convey to our consumers. So it's sort of this like win-win-win-win type situation. And it solves some real need. And so I think you need to be creative to come up with those types of non-conventional solutions, because at first the factory pushed back on this, right? Because it was like outside of the norm of how they normally work with their brands. But if you can like rally your partners around these ideas, it's amazing to see what it did on the production floor, right? Like how it changed the dynamic of these sewers suddenly seeing some appreciation and seeing that their faces, like we did interview and videos that live on the PDP. So for them to see us telling their story, it just created this really, really interesting dynamic and close alignment between us and our suppliers. So.
You said you had some pushback there. I'm curious, what's that conversation like when you're trying to convince a factory, a supplier, to go with the way you want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, like any organization, any factory optimizes for efficiency, so they have their way of doing things, and they try to like optimize for marker efficiency and all that. So whenever you try to change that, it takes some mutual trust, and I think that's why it's so important with regard to any supply chain effort to build deep, meaningful relationships, long-term relationships. Two of our major suppliers participated in our last round of funding and are now investors in our company. which really aligns incentives in a very beneficial way. And we look at these partnerships as true long-term relationships, and that makes it easier to come up with these more creative solutions, as opposed to just thinking of it as a transactional encounter where both parties try to maximize every dollar out of the transaction. That's a lot harder to come to a creative solution that way.
Yeah, for us, we're fortunate because a lot of other brands or influencers or people who believe in what we're doing, so people who are much bigger than we are want to work with us. And the way that comes about is we view anyone who we might work with as, can we be friends before we're business partners? Do we really believe in the same things? Because we're very values based on the softer side of values, if you will. So we spend a lot of time, personal time, social time with the people who we think we want to work with and who want to work with us, and then once we work with them. So it feels more like a family or friends, and we know that they're aligned with thinking in the same way. We know the people we work with are committed to the Kids Foundation and want to support the work that we're doing there, and everyone views it bigger than the dollars that we're going to make together. And don't get me wrong, the dollars are always good, but if you're only striving towards that, you might not make the same decisions. So you'll see the people who we're partners with just hanging out in the office or going on trips with the founders or myself. So it's a nice way to work.
Can either of you, share an example of a time that you made a decision that fit your values, but might have been kind of expensive, and where there may have been a more efficient or cost-effective way to do it?
Yeah, I can share another line of product that we have is our Cusa line, where we use llama insulation that we source from the Bolivian Altiplano. We use llama wool, turn it into an insulator. Llama fiber has some really amazing technical quantity. It's a hollow fiber, so there's air trapped inside, which means you need very little material to have great insulating qualities. And these families that have these herds on the Altiplano of llamas, their main income stream is from slaughtering the llamas and selling the meat in the local markets. So we try to create an incremental income stream. They typically live at around $200 a year. So some of Bolivia is the poorest country in South America, and these are some of the poorest communities in Bolivia itself. So we wanted to find a way to, again, leverage our supply chain and our purchasing power in country to create incremental income. And that fiber is a little bit more expensive. It would be easier for us and cheaper to just use some polyester insulation in these jackets, or use merino wool for our sweaters and socks, et cetera. But we felt strongly that we can have a real impact on the ground, and the benefits of having this rich story behind the sort of empowerment of those communities, a really truly unique natural fiber that is underdeveloped. There is no standards and no market for it so far. That the benefits of having that rich story would outweigh those costs. And we are starting to see that those campaigns, whether it's the Del Dia line, whether it is the Cusa line, if you look at it from a marketing efficiency perspective, we see tremendous benefit to having these rich social impact-driven stories behind our products. Both from a direct response perspective, we see higher open rate, higher click-through rate, higher conversion rate on our PDPs on those products. And then the biggest lift is in terms of sort of residual lifetime value. The customers who first transacted with the brand through one of these products were drawn into the brand through one of these impact stories. They keep coming back and spend 30 to 70% more dollars over their lifetime with Cotopaxi than people who just purchased one of our other products. So there is real economic business benefit to the impact work, which sometimes can be hard, right, to sort of make that link. And you may get pushback from your board or other stakeholders saying you guys shouldn't you just be optimizing for profit and let the shareholder worry about taking those dividends and then redistributing them to charity. But we feel so strongly that the problem with that model is that oftentimes that doesn't happen, right? And so we feel so strongly that we as an organization need to be driving this and are starting to see real hard data how our impact work is driving economic benefit for the organization.
Yeah, I was going to go the same place you are. We're not a traditional advertiser. We don't spend a lot of money on media. We'd much rather reach fewer people more deeply and let them become advocates for the brand. So we used to put on a lot of music festivals, and the music festivals would, pardon me, benefit the Kids Foundation. You know, you're in one geography, you're spending a lot of money for people to experience, you know, what Life is Good is all about. That same money you could probably reach, you know, 30 times, probably more, the number of people. But we know the people in the same thing. The return on the people who are loyal to you is much greater. They become your advocates. And so there's an easy way, I guess, to reach people in a deeper way. We'll do things like a kids art contest. Kids draw t-shirts, what makes life good for them, through our partners. And, you know, there's thousands, and they don't come. I thought they'd come digitally. It seems so easy, but no, people like their art. They come in snail mail, like in buckets, thousands. We didn't know what's happening in the office. You know, it's a hard road to go through all those and the like, but it's beautiful. But all those people took the time to draw what optimism means for them, a parent and a child together, and took the time to actually put it in the mail, you know, old school, and write a little story. So we go deep and hard with the marketing because it does create loyalty, and that grows.
And we've just got a couple more minutes before we get to questions. I just want to make sure that, you know, we talk a little bit about the work that you do, the poverty work you do. Can you talk about some of the organizations or work there?
Yeah, absolutely. So our impact work is sort of structured around 3 core pillars. The first one is our grant making, where we dedicate 2% of our revenue to 12-month grants. We focus that on 3 sort of core areas: health, education, and livelihoods, and exclusively work with organizations that are very carefully vetted to have proven a track record to improve metrics in those areas. So for health, that's under 5 child mortality rate. For education, that's primary literacy rate. And for livelihoods, that's essentially income dollars created. And those 3 metrics, there's ample research showing that if you improve those in a community, you actually change the trajectory of that community in terms of their long-term development, right? Kids live longer, and you teach people to read. That just changes the trajectory in terms of like overall income potential. So that's why we focus on those areas, and, you know, have a process in place to select and work with organizations that help us achieve and deliver on those goals. The second one is, and that's sort of our local US-based effort, is skills-based volunteering, where we work primarily with the refugee community in Utah. We're based in Salt Lake City, Utah. There are over 60,000 refugees in the state of Utah. And there we do everything from skills-based training, where, for example, our engineering team has put up a coding program where they teach refugee youth computer science and coding skills. We work with the International Rescue Committee as our primary partner and their job club, where refugee write thank you cards for us. It was, you know, for us being an e-commerce business, it's hard to build these like deep, meaningful relationships with our customers. And the most emotional touch point that we have is when our package shows up at the door. So we wanted to find a way to somehow humanize that experience. And what we did in the very beginning, we just wrote handwritten thank you cards. Obviously, that wasn't scalable, and so but we didn't want to let go of that, and we wanted to find a way to still have this sort of like human touch. And so we started working with the IRC and have refugee youth write these thank you cards. They typically write our tagline of "Adventure On" and "Do Good" in their native language. And it's incredible to see like the type of response we're getting from our customers. We just had an email from a woman who wrote us, "Do you guys do research on your customers? I just returned from Somalia. I was a caseworker there. And I received, you know, this package with a handwritten thank you card from a South Sudanese refugee, and you know, it made me cry and like took me back there, and so it created this like very intimate like human connection that is so powerful and really hard to create as a brand, and so that's sort of our skills-based volunteering work. And then the third pillar is our supply chain efforts, which we discussed. So that's how the impact materializes and is sort of incorporated throughout the entire value chain of the organization.
And we just have a couple seconds before we need to get to questions, but I was wondering maybe if you could share, Lisa, maybe, you know, a great outcome from the work you do with the Kids Foundation.
Sure. I mean, for us, there's so many stories. We're focusing on kids who are facing, we call adverse childhood experiences, which is like the probably leading predictor of early death in kids. If you experienced any sort of trauma when you're young, it is the predictor. So we try to get kids in their preschool years. And we hear from these kids now years and years later. So there's one woman we just actually met with who lost both of her parents to AIDS when she was 6. But the caregiver, who was a playmaker, and that's what we call the people we train, kind of like stepped in when this girl really needed somebody, stayed with her all, as a sort of mentor for her whole life. And now she's in early child. She graduated from college. She's an early educator herself. She's a playmaker herself. And so it's the stories that you hear, how one trusted adult, doesn't matter. It could be your coach, could be your teacher, could be your neighbor. If you're a kid in trauma and you don't have that parental support system, we're trying to help people make those connections to, bring them through to the stages of life. So we love hearing the stories.
So that's so inspiring. I'm all charged up. But Bailey, I'm wondering if we've got some questions.
We do. We have a few questions. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions throughout the app. We have a few minutes for them. The first one that came in was one about how you build a culture around giving back with your employees at all levels, and if there's any specific insights about some of the ways your employees give back, and if there's any trends you see with millennials and how they give back.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I think volunteering is an amazing way, and I know many organizations do that, but we have what we call 10% in the wild time, so every employee is encouraged to spend 10% of their working time either outdoors in the wild, testing our product, testing competitors' product, or volunteering. So I think as an organization, you need to, from the top down, need to make a very clear commitment and be real about it, that you want your employees to do this, and it needs to happen on work time. It's not something that you would expect them to do on the weekends exclusively, but you need to make time and give them the ability to volunteer. There are matching programs that can be really effective. I think whatever you do, it needs to be true to who you are as a brand. I think you need to look inside sort of your corporate soul and identify who are we and what is the product that we're making and what is the service that we're offering, and then find something that aligns with that in an authentic manner that feels real. And I think involving your employees in that process can be really powerful, as opposed to it being a top-down initiative to say, hey, we volunteer for organization X or we donate to organization Y. Let your employees, especially with this younger millennial crowd, they like to be their own boss. So the more you can empower them to have a say in the impact strategy of your organization, the more buy-in you'll get.
Yeah, for us, it's, and similar to Stefan, first of all, they're giving back every day, because everything that you're doing in your job, right, is creating profit or revenue, however you do it, to give back. So that feels really good to folks, but our mission doesn't need to be their only mission. So there's plenty of flexible time off or days off, whatever you want to do. We want you to go volunteer. We don't need to have everyone just bought into kids. The Kids Foundation, they have their own work. So they're highly encouraged to be involved in organizations. We're very fortunate because we work with a lot of different organizations, so we can make introductions for people with specific needs. And the like. Everyone on the for-profit side is trained to be a playmaker. That's the training or the discoveries that we do on the nonprofit side. So everyone goes through that, and they can go through it at different levels and be part of participating in the discoveries and the trainings we do. So we're open. I mean, the main thing I think it starts with is give back to yourself and give back to your family. And I think when you have a culture of that, saying, we're about family first. Don't ever miss a kid's baseball game or whatever's important to you, or life events, or if somebody's ill in your family. Start with that. Make sure you make time for yourself, and then we're very, very flexible with, and supportive of whatever passions folks have.
Great, thank you. Another question we had was around challenges, and what are some of the challenges both your organizations have faced while staying true to your values?
Yeah. Want me to go?
Go ahead.
I mean, for us, it's a matter of focus. I mean, optimism is pretty general. The people you can help, it's hopefully everybody. And so we get a lot of requests to partner, to raise money with other organizations. Every time there's a tragedy, we used to do fundraising shirts. Well, if you did that, sadly today, that would be your whole business. So staying focused is hard for us because we want to do good. And so you see opportunities everywhere. So we work really hard to say our social mission is about the 10% for kids and the Kids Foundation and the populations that we serve. But I can't deny that on a daily basis, I'm like, oh, but if we could just, you want to do a lot, you want to do more. But that has not served us well the times we've tried to do that, because you'll kind of lose your, you lose your way at some point. And so now I'm very stringent upon, where and how we can help. Now we'll support anyone in different kinds of resources or direct them to the right folks, but that is a daily challenge for us.
Yeah, I would agree, especially if your brand is known to be a brand that does good besides pursuing an economic objective. You will get a lot of inbound requests. Hey, can you guys help here or do that? So I think staying true, defining what your giving strategy is and staying true to that, and being able to say no and point to that, I think is an important one. I think another one I would mention is just sort of managing the impact work itself. It's very easy to want to do good, but it's actually kind of hard to do it well. Both from a regulatory perspective, there's a lot of rules around cause marketing, around how to manage these funds. You guys went with an in-house foundation, which makes perfect sense and makes that a little bit easier. Obviously, then you need the talent to run that and to the expertise. So it's, when we started, we were so naive, right? We were entrepreneurs, we wanted to do good, and it was our personal desire, and we sort of recognized that our business could be a way to amplify that and to leverage and increase the impact that we could have beyond just personal giving and volunteering. But we didn't know what we were doing from an impact perspective, right? We chose a couple of charities for the first couple of months that we had a personal relationship to, and we knew the founders, so there was trust and transparency in that sense, but there was no strategy around it. So one of our very first hires, even before bringing in a senior marketer, was an impact person. Who became our Chief Impact Officer. And she had incredible background and credentials from Salesforce Foundation, Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Her name is Lindsay Knoven. And so she helped us really put a strategy around our impact work and a process. And so there's a lot of effort that needs to go into doing impact the right way and making sure you're not disrupting local economies by, just handouts that put people out of business, and there are some organizations that got in trouble for that. And so you need to manage this properly. Otherwise, you can face a lot of pushback from impact watchdogs, especially as you reach a certain scale. So managing that the right way and dedicating the right resources to do impact the proper way and follow these best practices is not trivial.
Just one other thing to add for us, because we're in a tricky situation where it's the Life is Good Kids Foundation, and Life is Good, but we can't fund all the work of the Kids Foundation. So now, the demand for their work is far greater than us by a pretty big magnitude. But there is a little bit of when you're that closely tied, well, shouldn't Life is Good just be paying, for all that, and how to explain the work separate from us. And so now we're getting very successful. A lot of other organizations and who want to partner up and understand it, but that was definitely a barrier to the growth of that impact work for a little while.
Okay. So
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
And so the final one was around tactics, and what are some of the tactics you use to instill your values at all levels?
Within the organization?
Yes.
Okay. For us, it's really easy. We have those superpowers. They drive everything that we do. In people's reviews, we say you can be a great performer, but if you're not at least culturally neutral to a cultural asset, which means spreading the superpowers, we actually don't want you in the organization. I know that sounds really harsh, but it's true. Those values are everything to us. And if you're not everyone has to be the most outgoing or the most fun or most humorous. You don't have to live them all. That would be a lot. There'll be a lot of people, too much. But you have to be true to those things. So we're evaluating people in their reviews to say, what superpowers do you embody and why, and which ones do you feel you need to work on? And we stand behind that. So that's how people are evaluated. But we live it ourselves. We make sure we call it the support team, which is our leadership team. We make sure that we're saying, all right, are we living it? Gratitude, not fake gratitude, but making sure you're calling people out when they're doing a good job, not just the people on your team, being grateful for what they do, being compassionate if somebody's going through a tough time. We really hold ourselves to a high standard. And it was fun because I actually got a letter of gratitude back to me from somebody in the organization to our leadership team, because we always send them out saying, hey, we probably don't stop to tell you guys how grateful we are to you. guys and what you do, and it felt like, okay, we're doing a decent job here. But we work on it every day.
Great. I don't know if I have time to answer as well, but yeah, very, very much in line with this, I think.
You have 6 seconds.
Okay. Brand and internal cultures are two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
And so they need to be managed accordingly. We do that through also hiring, recruiting. We have this rule of 3 in place where we interview enough people to have 3 amazing candidates, to have at least 3 people, including somebody from the founding team, meet every single hire, including any warehouse associate, et cetera. And we always ask for 3 references that we have long conversations with. We have our In the Wild time, 10%. We have an 18 months adventure, bucket list adventure stipend. So once you have a tenure of 18 months, we pay you $1,000 to go travel. So really trying to incorporate these sort of like values around doing good, about people, around adventure, internally as we portray the brand externally. It really is, the two need to go together, especially with a consumer-facing brand.
And just a very, thank you so much for this. If either of you have a very, very quick final thought that you'd like to share.
No, this is great. Thanks for listening. Go spread some optimism today with the people you meet, and I appreciate it. And I love learning from Stefan's company. I think they're doing an amazing, amazing job.
Yeah, likewise. No, I think, I know we're out of time. I think, sort of my closing comments with regard to this impact work, I think it needs to be authentic. It needs to be part of really who you are as an organization. If it's a CSR initiative that's hung under the marketing department, consumers will see through that and it won't work, and it can actually backfire. It needs to be impactful in the sense that you need to manage your impact work with the same rigor as you do any other business initiative. So metrics-driven, performance and outcome-driven. And lastly, it can't be an excuse for subpar products and services. You can't expect a consumer to transact with you and repeat transact with you if your product and services sucks, and just because you're doing good, right? So you need to be excellent at what you do, and then the impact and social impact work is sort of the cherry on top, but it cannot be a substitute for it.
Correct.
Steph and Lisa, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, Lisa, and Philana for your insights and values. And everyone, if you believe in these products, support them. They're doing amazing things, and they can't do it without all of the consumers across the country helping out as well. While many of us in the room work for large organizations, often dealing with international and national complex problems, solutions often are found at the local level. Our next speakers are leading these local initiatives that improve the economic climate of these cities. Mayor Greg Fisher of Louisville, Kentucky, is committed to building a culture of innovation and job growth, and he's joined by Mayor Muriel Bowser right here in Washington, D.C. The mayor here has sought to create pathways to the middle class for all the residents and foster a culture of inclusion, transparency, and action. This discussion will be led by Jim Anderson, who's the Director of Government Innovation at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Jim directs a program that helps city leaders solve the most vexing challenges through innovation, data, evidence, and collaboration. Please join me in welcoming all 3.
All right. So good morning. I'm Jim Anderson. I lead the government innovation programs at Bloomberg Philanthropies. We work with cities around the globe to help them solve problems, and we try and elevate ideas that are worth spreading so that other cities can benefit from them. At this point, we're working with around 270 cities globally through our grants, technical assistance, and education programs, including the 2 cities represented by these 2 fine mayors here on the stage. I'll say very quickly by way of introduction, Mayor Fisher was actually one of our very first grantees. He was an original member of our innovation teams program. Mayor Bowser is a member of multiple programs, including one of the most recent initiatives we launched, focused on helping global cities prepare for an autonomous vehicles future. They've both worked with us on data and evidence, and they're both members of our Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Program. And from my perch, I will say that they are amongst the very best leaders in the world, and they are running some of the most effective city governments that we have seen out there, to their great leadership credit. So at Bloomberg, we are focused on sort of 5 core competencies that we work to promote with all of the cities that we work with. The first is around boldness of leadership and sort of how do mayors and civic leaders raise the expectations of citizens and civil servants around what to expect from public services. The second is around data. How do we use data rather than gut instinct or tradition to decide how we're allocating resources and solving problems? The third is experimentation. How do we get more rigorous and more intentional about how we test new ideas, figure out what works, get rid of the things that don't, and mainstream the things that do? Citizen engagement. How do we better engage our public in solving public problems and sort of new and interesting ways to deepen trust and confidence in local government? And the fifth, which is really the subject of today's conversation, is collaboration. We all know that government goes it alone, doesn't go very far. And cities are really beginning to beef up the muscles and the skills that they're using to create more meaningful, deeper partnerships that can really expand the sort of depth and breadth of impact. I think that this is a period where we're seeing an incredible amount of innovation around public-private partnerships and collaboration. We're seeing public and private partners form campaigns. We're seeing public and private services come together to meet needs in unique ways. We're seeing public and private funding come together to fund innovation. And so today, we're going to zero in on that and talk with these mayors a little bit about that some more. So let me start with giving you guys a quote that I love from some recent research that the Brookings Institute put out. They said, "The need to lead beyond the limits of formal powers is a defining condition of mayoral reality." Mayor Bowser, can you talk a little bit about that notion, and does it resonate?
It absolutely resonates. I think there's certainly a lot of things that mayors are required to do each day in our work. And I always look at my work in kind of 3 buckets. I make budgets. That's one of the biggest things that you do as mayors, reflect the values and your initiatives through your budgets. I hire a great team, and I'm a manager of that team first and foremost to make sure they're getting the job done. I'm a policy leader, so I look at gaps in the law to figure out the things that we need to change and the new initiatives that we need to enact. But more than that, I'm the leader of people. Our 680,000 residents, our businesses, our visitors, and that no more is that role kind of defined and very present than when there are times of challenge. And we have certainly seen in our city over the last year where last November around this time, everybody was pretty shell-shocked and wondering what does a change mean and how is our city going to react and how are different subgroups impacted. And so being a leader and tapping into your ability, your unique ability when you're the chief executive to comfort, to lead, to ease anxieties, but also to have the confidence of people that you would do the right thing in each take. So I think in times of challenge, mayors being able to rely on their informal authority and powers, relationships, and leverage that we have because we operate big organizations to work with our private sector partners is hugely important.
Great. So Mayor Fisher, relationships, formal and informal powers, bringing people together, as Mayor Bowser just talked about. How does partnership and collaboration fit into your leadership strategy?
Well, it's obviously critical. I say to be a good mayor, you have to have the head of a chief executive officer and the heart of a social worker, because everybody's on our team, and that's the big difference between being a mayor and the head of an organization, and I'm a business person that just happens to be mayor right now. So when you have the full bell curve of life as your constituency, it gets very interesting, especially on the far right and far left of the bell curve. But viewing them as partners for a city moving forward is extraordinarily critical. I mean, it's easy to focus, let's say, on our business strategy or an education strategy. It's a little bit more difficult. But when you talk about building partnerships so that everybody is at the table and their voices are being heard, because it's critical that they are all involved with a positive and hopeful lens for the future for us to optimize economic results and human results. That's where it gets more difficult, and it's very different from business, to bringing voices to the table that are not used to being heard sometimes. But in the dynamic of our cities right now, which are extraordinarily diverse, extraordinarily global, in these very unusual times, as Mayor Bowser said, it's more important than ever that people are being heard, or else you see results like what's happened in our country since Ferguson, Missouri, where people go to the streets and feel hopeless and disconnected about a positive future. Or this last presidential election, there was a cry from rural America about people feeling hopeless and disconnected. So how do you bring all those folks together, and last, Jim, in a most important way, where they feel like it's a win-win? We're in a time right now where so many people frame issues as win-lose. You win, they lose. In business, we know it's all about growing the pie, an abundance mentality. If we were able to get everybody in our city up to a median wage, we would create an additional GDP in our city of several $billion extra. That's good for everybody.
Well, you know, building on that, so abundance mentality, I love that. And if you have the pleasure of speaking with either of these mayors, you very quickly get to values. And you very quickly get to sort of the values that are guiding their policy, their staffing, their partnership decisions. Mayor Fisher talks a lot about trust, compassion. Mayor Bowser talks a lot about inequality and opportunity. Can you guys talk a little bit about, given that bell curve and sort of this notion of sort of the abundance mentality, how do values help you bring people together around shared goals?
Well, I think a lot of cities are experiencing what we are experiencing in Washington. People are moving here, businesses are moving here, and we're prosperous in a lot of metrics. Except many people, because of that prosperity that is growing, they are feeling the crunch of higher housing costs, childcare costs, transportation costs. So they are not experiencing the same prosperity that we see when we look around. So our values around including more Washingtonians is really shared. No matter where you are, if you're at the lower end of the income spectrum or the higher end, people have just an innate sense that it's wrong, that more people aren't participating in that prosperity. So it's been our job to give the taxpayer, the businessman, the local community group something to do about it. And we were talking backstage a lot about housing and how housing is so key to everything else that we do. Kids are more successful in school if they have safe housing. People are healthier if they have safe housing. And we have to unwind the problem of affordable housing in our city. And partnerships for us in that regard are key. A city can do a lot of things, but we need private sector investment to help us.
So the aspiration of bringing everybody in and creating space for all voices to be heard is a good one. But you guys are managers, and you're having to actually convert that aspiration into reality. And I know with your inclusive economic development plan, there was an incredible process that very methodically brought different voices to the table. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then, Mayor, I'll ask you a similar question about your process.
Right. So let me just say, I don't know where everybody's from here, but this is not your grandfather's Washington, D.C. So a lot of times when people come to Washington, D.C., they only think of the Capitol, what's happening in the Capitol, what's happening in the White House, what's happening, of course, maybe what's happening at the Pentagon over in Virginia. But the truth is we have been very successful over the last several years in attracting private sector jobs and investment. And a lot of that has been around tech. And it's developed quite organically in many ways. Women in tech, femtech, as they say, is very vibrant in DC. It's a fantastic place for women to start and grow their businesses. So what we have done, our idea around inclusive tech has been to also diversify our economy so we're more resilient moving forward with private sector employment, but also to create our niche. So we're not Silicon Valley, we're not Boston, we're DC, and we know that women in tech and people of color in tech are really finding a place to start and grow in DC, and we want to make sure our ecosystem supports it.
So Mayor Fisher comes out of the business world and probably has like the most well mapped out sort of strategy for increasing innovation and performance capacity. Mayor Bowser's right up there as well. But Mayor Fisher really, I think, is a role model for many mayors along these lines. So talk a little bit about how you've beefed up your partnership chops. It's not, many cities historically haven't invested in the capacity to build, maintain, sustain partnerships. How have you done it?
Well, first off, we do it by kind of framing what the job is. This was my first government job, and people always complain about bureaucrats. What I found is there just wasn't much training put toward the job of government. So people might get functional training, but they didn't get training on increasing their human potential around problem solving, project management, whatever. So I looked at this as kind of a transformation challenge to transform government to a high performance entity that helps set the tone for a city of continuous improvement and a city of innovation as well. And so many of the companies obviously were delighted to see this type of approach toward government. And so we partner with our local companies like Humana, Brown-Forman, GE Appliances, et cetera, to help us advance down these initiatives. Then when we take on major community-facing projects, let's say in population health, for instance, we leverage our local community around optimal aging, companies like Humana, many of our local physicians, our anchor institutions in our universities, and ask our citizens, Jim, to get involved. We call them citizen scientists instead of volunteers, and use them to collect different population health data, for instance, when people use their asthma inhalers, so we can understand where that's happening in our cities, so we can do broad-scale mitigation, and then individual intervention as well. So it's pulling all these folks together around a common interest, in this case, improving health. But we can only do that if we broadly engage the community and through the power of the web right now. So we increase collective health, but then we also then have respiratory therapists call individuals to improve their individual health. So it's a great example of how in a modern day to use innovation to improve health, but the equally important thing is it starts building trust. Okay, we're living in an era where some leaders are trying to really destroy horizontal trust, trust between people, and vertical trust, trust between people and institutions. When people see the government working together and they're part of that, that increases trust. And of course, you can only build a great company or a great city if people trust each other and are developing social muscle.
Mayor Bowser, maybe you can talk a little bit about DC's got an incredible track record of using data across the board. Where does data and partnerships come together? How do you sort of think about impact? How do you think about shared definitions of success?
Sure. I'll give you I assure you everybody's going to laugh when I say this, but it is very serious in a lot of ways. One of the projects right now that we're trying to use data coming in from around the city, private sector data, and define the metrics of success, or how we're going to abate rats.
Love it.
And it is, we have a lab at DC that has looked at all kinds of the numbers and giving us some predictive analytics about where we should go and the type of preventive measures that we put in. And we're going to use our CapStat approach in about a week to bring in all of our agencies. We're going to bring in some of the private companies that are experts here and try to look at what the numbers tell us. So population growth is key. Restaurant growth is key. Where we have activity now that we didn't used to have activity is important. Just all of those things that go into a changing city, weather patterns, all of those things that we're looking at to see how it can inform how we better do our jobs. A number of us are involved in smart cities initiatives, for example, and just looking at city trash cans, and how how we use sensors to help decide where we're gonna collect, how often our trucks are making trips around, if we can avoid that, which have traffic and air quality impacts. So that's just one very basic, we call it back to basics example of what we're working on in our city, to not just use old techniques to deal with a problem that is changed as the city has changed.
I'll tell you, this is an idea that's going to spread like nobody's business.
Is this rat stat? Is that what we're calling it?
Rat stat.
Rat stat.
We need that. All right, that's great.
That's a real problem you're addressing here. Is there a correlation to rats in election cycles?
Oh.
Actually, it is.
Actually, yes.
It turns out the last year we've seen a proliferation of rats.
This is the one thing you'll all remember from today's discussion. Great. So I've been reading a lot lately about sort of Eastman Kodak and Rochester and the history of that incredible relationship between that company and that community. And those kinds of relationships still exist in many cities. But I think you as mayors are also striking partnerships with lots of companies that don't have a strong staff presence or a long history of engagement in your communities. And I wonder if you could give us an example of a partnership with one of those more global companies that you're excited about, and how you think those partnerships are different than some of the older school partnerships of lore, like Eastman Kodak and Rochester. Mayor Fisher, you want to go first?
Yeah, we had obviously every community wants to have a thriving, creative economy, a technology economy. So we've approached our larger companies in Louisville. One of them is GE Appliances. And we asked them if they would publicize what their intellectual property and innovation challenges are. Of course, they kind of looked at us like we were crazy. But our theory was, with the amount of coders, hackers, makers that we have in our community, to innovate, the more outside of the box ideas you can get, the better it is for you. And nobody's really has any secrets anymore. So we went on this tremendous journey with GE Appliances that ended up with them opening up their challenges, leading to the development of a co-creation facility in Louisville called First Build that solicits ideas from around the world through the web. We have a micro factory with them as well. And it's allowed them to significantly decrease their new product development cycle time, in addition to coming up with hordes of ideas around new products that they had not had before. So this took a leadership at GE Appliances that kind of said, okay, we don't know everything. We're going to open this to the world, unleashing the local power that we have with our creatives, and as I said, coders, makers, and hackers. And then it's a partnership with the University of Louisville Speed School of Engineering as well. So that's been established, and it's become the go-to hackathon space in our community and maker space in community. Robotics, high schoolers, grade schoolers, so it starts having this amplification effect where other businesses start locating around it as well. So my premise is that every business should be putting out their big challenges with invention and creation every year, open them up to the world, and then see what ideas come through them. Those are the companies that will innovate the fastest. And again, it helps set the tone for the city, and people look at city government in a different way. We're involved with things like this.
Great. Mayor Bowser?
I would say recently we had a new company come into the city that merged with an old company. It was a Pepco Exelon merger, a utility merger that happened in Washington. So you had very much an old school a company. And I would like to say that because they're the electricity provider, it was the company that people love to hate. But it was theirs. And so they felt like another company coming in, they weren't quite sure how it was going to work. But what we've seen, because Pepco is a much larger company, national company, come in, that we have to explore what the opportunities are to work with a bigger company. There is only one Fortune 500 company in DC, the Danaher Company. And so we have spent a lot of time in our administration recruiting more, and we're always in a recruitment how should I say, competition when big companies are looking for a place to land, because we think it's important to change that corporate culture and to make it a larger corporate culture in DC, because there are a lot of things that have to be managed with that, but there can be a lot of benefits that come with that as well. One key thing that we've seen is often in bigger companies, especially if the decision maker is local, they can do things quickly. It sounds like that's what Greg is talking about. They can go from idea to implementation relatively quickly. And that's what we found with working with Pepco. We had the idea, we had 2,500 infrastructure jobs go unfilled in DC last year. That means that the work from our public utilities, our transit agency, our own DPW and at DDOT, billions of dollars in the pipeline of work, but we weren't finding DC residents to fill those jobs. So we're creating just a workforce training program related to those infrastructure jobs for the utilities. And we could get very quick buy-in, and I really give a lot of credit to those senior leaders at big companies who get it. They want to support government efforts that are effective and can make decisions quickly.
And so do you have a team of people that focus on partnerships in DC Gov, or is that a distributed responsibility?
It is largely distributed, and we have really focused on trying to do more. You may know, and because Mayor Bloomberg was very helpful with us with the DC Public Education Fund, for example. So in our public schools, we had one effort, it was led by the Chancellor of Schools, that focused on attracting private sector partnerships. They don't do anything else, just DC Public Schools. But then I have another organization, Partnerships and Grants, that looks across the city with partnerships to see what else we can do. The best model for us has been the DC Public Education Fund,
It's a
which
professional team.
Singularly focused.
They know how to maintain and sustain those relationships. That's so important.
Absolutely.
Mayor Fisher, this is a group of people who, in their professional day jobs, are forming partnerships often and all the time with governments and others. How do you maintain a sort of openness to incoming from outside, as opposed to ideas for partnership that generated from within your own administration? How do you maintain openness to the kinds of people that are sitting in this room? And what advice do you have for the kinds of people sitting in this room to approach government around sort of partnerships and stronger relationships?
Well, the best way, obviously, is to have an existing relationship, and the natural way to do that is through workforce development, and starting with career pathing in our high schools and then going all the way through to when someone gets employed in the city. It's extraordinarily important, obviously, for us all to be partnering around a prosperous future for everybody right now. In our country and our cities are going through massive demographic change right now. As we all know, there's a large degree of inequality. It's growing in our country, in our cities right now. So we cannot have successful cities, and you all will not have a successful workforce if people feel like they're disenfranchised in some type of way. So for us to figure out together how to build those skills and accountability so that you have a workforce of the future that's ready to go as a result of partnerships that start at the high school or grade school level with you all and then go through colleges is extraordinarily important. So when we talk about equity, equity is important, I believe, for moral reasons, economic development reasons, and public safety reasons. And the business community has got to be right in the middle of that. It can't be viewed as some do-good government type of thing. It's essential for the future of our country, and business has got to be leading it.
What an awesome charge and great way to end this conversation. Please join me in thanking the two mayors for this terrific conversation today.
Thank you.
And now, please welcome the Managing Director, Texas Competes, Jessica Shorthall.
Hi. Here are the only 4 facts that you need to know to make sense of the story I'm about to tell you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Texas politics. So, fact number one, 2/3 of the state House and Senate in Texas are held by the majority party, so supermajority. Fact two, more than 80% of those House seats, and Senate seats, regardless of party, are considered unflippable. They're drawn so as to be safe in a general election. Fact three, this safe seat dynamic means that the primary elections in Texas play an outsized role in Texas politics. Because if you win your primary, then you are almost guaranteed to sail to victory in a general election. And fact four, Texas is a very low voter turnout state, and the problem is significantly worse in the primary. So the voters that turn out there tend to skew much older and much more socially conservative. So this little group of voters determines the shape of Texas politics for the whole state. So then the problem that these four facts converge to create is that legislators pro-business, who would otherwise typically avoid culture war issues and stick to the business of the state, sometimes make the decision to follow these wedge issues because they will win primaries for them. They want to keep their seat. And so they make compromises and go after issues to divide people. And this is a statewide issue as well. So we see statewide elected officials and leaders sometimes leading the charge on these culture war issues because they're primary winning issues. In other words, the whole state of Texas is being pulled off the rails by factors that are more structural than demographic. One of the strongest themes in recent years, hang on. There we go. One of the strongest themes in recent years has been the push for legislation designed to restrict the lives of LGBT people. And this is happening while public opinion, especially millennial opinion, is veering sharply in the other direction. So now, at the exact same time as all of this, Texas's leaders are touting the state's pro-business brand. They are courting corporate relocations. Texas tourism, much of it business tourism for conferences and meetings just like this one, is the second largest industry in the state. And tax revenues from businesses make up the lion's share of state revenues. So it's with this backdrop that I'm going to ask you to come back to 2014 with me, where these two dynamics, the far-right veer and the pro-business push, are about to collide in spectacular fashion. So in 2014, while anti-LGBT rhetoric has been part of the kind of soup in Texas for a long time, the steady march toward federal marriage equality is really heating things up. And experts in Texas in 2014 expect to see a big push in 2015 for so-called religious refusal legislation that would allow people to, businesses and individual workers and even healthcare providers to refuse to serve someone on the basis of religion, and legislation that would preempt marriage equality in the state. Now, on the marriage equality front, in addition to the very real human impacts, this would be a PR nightmare. Imagine that the Supreme Court rules for marriage equality, which we now know that it will, and the headline is that Texas is the only holdout in the country. We know where public opinion on this issue is going in the United States, and so we know that this would be a really bad look for Texas from a PR perspective. And similarly, religious refusals legislation would have a similar brand impact on Texas, and it would be a logistical nightmare. So imagine you own a restaurant, and you literally have no control over whether a single server in your restaurant refuses to serve a gay couple, or a single mother, or a Muslim customer, or a Christian customer, simply based on that person's religious belief. So the more that we look at this public opinion data and where it's headed in the United States and in Texas, the more it speaks to us. It certainly spoke to me. And a picture started to emerge, which is that where a state stands on discrimination against LGBT people can become a litmus test, and probably will become a litmus test, for where people want to live and work and spend. So if a state has a negative brand on LGBT issues, our hypothesis is that will have a whole cascade of business and economic impacts. So if this hypothesis is true, it'll impact talent recruitment and corporate relocation and expansion, conference and event business, sports championships, and even things like movie and television shoots. All of those economic actors have a reason to worry about associating their brand and their money with discrimination. It's just that some of them haven't realized the risk yet. So our job in 2014 in Texas is to make the case that equal treatment is good for business and that the opposite is bad for business, for individual businesses and for the state's economy. To use data to show the business community that the risk is real and then to help them say something about it. Not lobby on it, but just publicly say that discrimination on LGBT issues is bad for the economy. So we start to share this data with them, and many business leaders either already agree with us or they quickly see the truth of what we're saying. But saying that out loud in Texas is a different proposition, because doing so would put them in direct opposition to state leadership. And these are folks they have to work with on a whole host of other business issues, and they often work together quite well. So we realize that we have to de-risk this somehow for them. We have to give them something more simple, less hostile, less confrontational, less political. So we conceive of this really simple statement, which just says, in order to remain competitive for talent, tourism, corporate investment, and innovation, Texas must become welcoming to LGBT people. And that's it. We ask businesses to sign this statement. And that is when the magic happens. One by one, business leaders across Texas say no. Okay, maybe not all of them, but it is an uphill climb at first. They agree in private about the data, and they're very concerned about the economic risks. But their very rational reading of the political situation in Texas tells them that being the first to say this out loud is a very risky move. So we come up with a hack. We say to them, give us a provisional yes on this statement. Tell us you might sign it, and we'll collect a list, and then we'll circulate that list back to all of you. If it crosses enough industry and geography, if it has enough big businesses, if it has enough of your competitors on it, then you can decide whether to go public with us. So we do that. And by April of 2015, we think we have enough names. We've got 80. Big and small businesses, some chambers of commerce, the State Chamber of Commerce. And we go back to that list. And we say, is this good enough? And only one business removes their name. And I'll never tell you who it is, for two reasons. The first is that trust is the only currency we have. And the second is that I consider every no a not yet in this scenario. And it's still a not yet, but we'll get there. So we go public with this coalition, which we call Texas Competes. It's organized just around that simple statement, but it hits with a splash, and for the first time, we see headlines in Texas like this. I mean, I could not have envisioned a world in which we'd see the terms free market economics, LGBT equality, and Texas in the same headline. Just as we're doing this, the Indiana state legislature passes in 2015 a religious refusals law. And in the first week, Indianapolis loses $60 million in convention business, and a $40 million corporate expansion is put on hold. In the first 30 days, Indiana suffers from 1 billion negative social media impressions, because brand damage in this day and age equals economic damage. We were right. Our data was right. Now, coincidentally, in 2015, there are 23 anti-LGBT bills filed in Texas, and they all dry up. But we keep going. We have an energized business community, and it's fast growing. By the end of 2015, we've grown by 5x to more than 400 members. Our job is just to educate, and we take it very seriously. We have a you heard it here first mentality. Business community should know that nothing big will happen on this front that they hear about somewhere else first. We give them what they need to make their own case internally to their CEOs to take whatever action they feel is appropriate for their business. And we offer the most concise analysis, the most laser focused on the economic case. One of the hard truths of this work is that the entire breadth of the LGBTQ movement cannot be crammed into this Texas economic message. We have to focus on where the true and present economic risk lies, because if the business community feels that we're trying to co-opt their participation to achieve other aims that aren't directly relevant to this economic message, we'll lose them. So it requires a lot of discipline. But by 2016, we have so much data to work with. Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi all face boycotts over anti-LGBT bills. And North Carolina famously passes its HB2 bathroom bill, which restricts where transgender adults and children can simply use the restroom when they're in public or in school. And North Carolina suffers an almost instantaneous $630 million economic hit, and that is just what is publicly reported. By now, almost half of meeting planners nationwide say that they would refrain from planning an event in a state with a discriminatory law like this on the books. So all of this sets the stage for 2017, when Texas legislature will convene again. And in Texas now, everyone is talking about where transgender people should be allowed to go to the bathroom. Now, transgender people have been going to the bathroom this whole time, but this is suddenly a hot topic. So law enforcement comes out and says, there's no there. This isn't an issue. Educators come out and say, this will cause a problem. Sexual assault experts and advocates come out and say, this type of policy will actually put people in danger. But remember those primaries. Nothing gets a base riled up like fear. Turning out primary voters and getting to 51% in a primary is a very attractive goal for some folks. So some of the state's top leaders take this up and actually call it a top priority for 2017. So as this unfolds, we keep doing our job, educating the business community. We share a lot with journalists. From 2015 to 2017, we get $15 million in earned media on this topic, local, state, national. And we grow to more than 1,300 members. So Texas Competes now has 52 Fortune 500 members that have some kind level of operations in Texas, 25 chambers of commerce, over 1,000 small businesses all over the state. So very few companies wanted to be first, but we now see that they also don't want to be last. In 2017, now we're able to track hard data, not just from North Carolina or Indiana, but from within the state of Texas. So we work with convention and visitors bureaus all over the state. And what they find is as this bathroom thing rages on in Texas, they already have lost $66 million in convention business. So these are economic actors who have said, we're not waiting to see whether this thing passes or fails. We're done with this and we're going to take our business elsewhere. So already a greater impact than what Indiana saw when it passed and signed into law a bill. And we work with these convention and visitors bureaus. We find out that there's another $1 billion in conferences and events on the line if a bathroom bill passes. So we're tugging at that pro-business brand, but on our end, we're using facts, not fear. Out in the arena, the business community makes a jump. We have this kind of safe waiting pool that's about data and education, but they jump to direct political action in 2017. So the State Chamber of Commerce, the Texas Association of Business, launches its own advocacy campaign against bathroom bills. IBM takes out full-page ads in the major metro papers. The oil and gas industry, biggest industry in Texas, pens an open letter to the governor of Texas opposing bathroom bills. In all, more than 700 businesses and business groups openly oppose bathroom bills in Texas in 2017. And that brings us to today. To today. So this year, Texas made it through a really ugly regular session and then an even uglier special session with no bathroom bill passing. And this happened against all discernible political odds. Now we, Texas Competes, we didn't kill those bills. That's not what we exist to do. But I do believe if we didn't exist to make the connection, to clarify the data, and to gather businesses around this data, that this conversation wouldn't have gotten where it got this year in Texas. On equal treatment, I think there's a huge opportunity to give the business community the tools it needs to make a case that is ironclad. My job is actually quite easy, no matter what you're thinking, because I don't have to make anything up. Facts are my friends. The economic risk is real, and the economic benefits of investing in equality are equally clear. But I also think this isn't just about blocking bad stuff from happening. It's time to be proactive at the state level and at the national level. So at Texas Competes, we're still going. We would welcome your business's participation. It is free. It takes 30 seconds at texascompetes.org, and we're also in the middle of launching a C4 entity called Texas Competes Action to take on more of a direct policy role. So we would welcome you. There's also a national coalition forming called America Competes that's working to give businesses a voice and a view nationwide on equal treatment and the economic case for it. There's no longer a bright line between social issues and business issues. And we've seen that play out in very clumsy fashion on all sorts of issues in the past couple of years. But there is more risk than ever in businesses staying silent on the moral issues of our day. So I think we have to know how to do this work and do it really well. There are people who will listen and be moved by the moral case for action. We saw this in Texas. Transgender people and parents of trans kids came and testified, and we saw very unexpected folks come out in support of them, not just the economic case, but the human case. But there are still lots of people and institutions that can only find their way to speaking up if it's an economic case that's presented because of their own risk calculations. And I think they'll do that if you present your case with rigor, with intellectual honesty, and with really good storytelling. And you have to do everything in your power to de-risk their engagement. And I'm just here to tell you that it's worth every minute and every data point and every ounce of energy that we can put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so now it is time for our working sessions. They will start at 11:15. Again, for those of you who may not have been here yesterday, they are on that side of the building. There are staff out there to point the way. There are signs out there to point the way. There are things on the floor to point the way. So you can't miss it. So we'll see you just a little bit before 12:30 for lunch, but enjoy the working sessions, and thank you again for being here.